Have you ever witnessed a high-stakes showdown where a pregnant farmer faces off against a ruthless biker gang bent on destroying everything she holds dear? In this thrilling saga, we follow Rachel Delgado, a brilliant agricultural engineer, as she outsmarts a criminal network attempting to poison her family's land. Every moment brims with tension, from covert evidence gathering to the heart-pounding confrontation that brings the gang to their knees. If you love stories packed with courage, clever strategies, and unexpected heroes, stick around, because this tale has it all. Before we dive deeper, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the twists and turns of this narrative or the many other captivating stories we share. Your support helps us bring more inspiring tales to light. Now get ready to immerse yourself in a pulse-pounding struggle where justice and hope rise against greed and intimidation, all culminating in a finish you won't want to miss. Rachel Delgado often stood at the edge of her vast fields at Sunfield Acres, one hand cradling her 7-month pregnant belly, and the other balancing a worn tablet encased in dusty leather. On the surface, she looked like any determined farmer in Carver County. Braided hair, muddy boots, flannel shirt, and an old hat shielding her from the bright midday sun. Yet behind those observant eyes and straightforward demeanor lay a deeply rooted brilliance. She was one of the most innovative agricultural engineers in the country, though people rarely guessed it. 3 years earlier, her father, Matthias Delgado, had passed away unexpectedly. Officially, the cause was a heart attack, but Rachel had always suspected more foul play was involved. A proud farmer, educator, and researcher, Matthias had devoted his life to protecting the region's farmland from droughts, contamination, and shady business deals. Upon his passing, Rachel took control of the family farm and discovered her father's hidden work. In an old workshop disguised beneath stacks of rusted tools, she found prototypes of advanced hydroponic equipment and partial research logs describing complex data patterns. Though the official story was that Matthias had died of natural causes, these files hinted otherwise. They implied someone had either accelerated his demise or deliberately hidden vital clues. Over subsequent months, Rachel analyzed the journals and fragments of coded notes he'd left behind. She assembled cutting-edge climate control systems in secret corners of her greenhouse, installed specialized LED lighting that ran on timers, and placed sensors disguised as weather instruments all over Sunfield Acres. Ostensibly, these sensors were for ordinary agricultural experiments, monitoring humidity, soil pH, and temperature patterns. But each had a secondary function: capturing unusual vehicle movement, tracking suspicious individuals skulking around at night, and recording faint chemical traces in the irrigation lines. She soon identified a repeating presence that unsettled her. The Mad Jackals Motorcycle Club, a local group known for rowdy behavior. This group, however, was overshadowed by a far more dangerous faction. A gang called the Iron Vultures had begun circulating in Carver County. Their reputation for land grabbing by intimidation was whispered among neighboring farmers. Yet the local rumor mill suggested that the Iron Vultures also had connections to more sophisticated activities, things that went well beyond petty extortion. Some of the county's older residents claimed these bikers specialized in pressuring farm owners to give up their properties for suspicious shell corporations. Water rights theft, chemical sabotage, and coerced sales were among their rumored tactics. Sunfield Acres quickly found itself on the Iron Vultures' radar. They arrived one cool morning, a line of motorcycles roaring through the dirt roads, scattering birds from the fences. Their leader, a towering man with beast stitched onto his leather vest, seemed to dismiss Rachel outright, her pregnant silhouette apparently marking her as an easy target. Riding beside him were 2 lieutenants with vests labeled Raptor and Blade, both scanning the farm's buildings, water pipelines, and electronic boxes near the greenhouse. They made no effort to hide their bold scrutiny. Rachel, quietly gathering data on her tablet, watched them with calm, unflinching eyes, her heart thudding with a mixture of caution and a simmering anger. These men threatened to disrupt everything Matthias Delgado had worked so diligently to preserve. He had dedicated entire decades to ensuring Carver County's farmland remained healthy, providing stable yields for countless families. Rachel's memory flickered to the day her father told her never to underestimate the power of those who saw farmers as gullible. "They expect us to cower," he had said. "Sometimes the best armor you can have is the predator's complacency. And indeed, Beast and his crew came in loud and brazen, apparently fully expecting to shake her down. They had no inkling that Rachel had spent the last 3 years following her father's cryptic leads, building a covert digital fortress hidden among the orchard rows. She possessed undeniable proof that the Iron Vultures were more than local bullies. They were part of a larger network. Carla Salazar, Sunfield, Acres supervisor for over 2 decades, approached Rachel just moments after the bikers' arrival. Her graying hair and lined face spoke of years battling pests, scorching heat waves, and tight profit margins. She carried a steaming mug of rosemary tea, bracing herself for a confrontation. Carla had worked for Matthias Delgado since she was in her early 20s. When Rachel was just a child, Carla had already been in the fields, learning from the elder Delgado's practical but compassionate teachings. Now she served as a second pair of eyes, a confidant, and a protective presence. "Those guys again," Carla muttered, handing Rachel the tea. "They've come sooner than we expected, no?" Rachel nodded, gazing down at her tablet. She had disguised it to appear antiquated, so no one would suspect it was feeding live surveillance feeds to a hidden data center beneath her greenhouse. "Yes, and they brought more muscle. They're definitely ramping up their intimidation cycle." She peered at the men revving their engines near the greenhouse entrance. "We have what we need to document it. Let them think we're just another vulnerable family farm." From day one, Rachel had realized that if the Iron Vultures were operating at this level, threatening farmers all over Carver County, someone higher up was orchestrating the madness. Perhaps local politicians, perhaps corporate suits, or a combination of both. The farmland in this region lay atop a critical aquifer, and rumors of special mineral deposits had circulated in obscure environmental reports. Matthias had uncovered more about that aquifer than he'd ever let on, and his private journals suggested the area's significance went far beyond agriculture. The bikers milled around the property, chuckling among themselves, scuffing the soil with their boots, or tapping on irrigation pipes with wrenches in an effort to unnerve the farm's small staff. Raptor, sporting mirrored sunglasses, gestured toward the greenhouse with a sneer. Blade shook his head, muttering something about newfangled contraptions and squeaky clean modern gear. Carla's expression tightened. "We've seen the same pattern in the next county over. Broken water lines, chemicals dumped in the soil, pests suddenly showing up in droves. Then right after, somebody from an unknown real estate company pops in and tries to buy the farmland cheap." She lowered her voice. "I even heard some older folks at the feed store talking about farmers who refused to sell and ended up in mysterious accidents." Rachel recalled an incident from 2 months back. A neighbor, Harriet Fraser, told them about a sabotage that destroyed half her orchard trees overnight. Harriet discovered traces of unidentifiable chemicals in her water supply soon afterward. Harriet eventually sold off at a devastating loss. Who purchased it? A corporation called Sun Horizon Development. And who was rumored to be in cahoots with them? None other than the Iron Vultures. Shifting her gaze back to the men, Rachel kept her expression guarded. She knew there was no sense confronting them directly just yet. Her father's warning rang in her mind. "Gather undeniable evidence before making your move." She set her mug down on a nearby crate. "Let's keep up appearances, Carla. Pretend we're intimidated. Let them say whatever they want while the cameras do their job." Behind them, hidden among ordinary farm equipment, advanced recording devices whirred quietly, capturing every hostile look, every threatening comment, and every scuff mark on the soil. From the outside, it seemed like the farm staff was helpless. In reality, every second was being converted into data points that would, Rachel hoped, piece together a devastating chain of custody, showing these men and their accomplices full wrongdoing. Over the next few days, the tension around Sunfield Acres escalated. Beast returned with a bigger entourage, deliberately revving engines in the driveway to show dominance, leaving behind tire tracks as visible warnings. While many farm workers avoided direct eye contact, Rachel made a habit of standing calmly on the wooden porch that led to the greenhouse whenever they arrived. Part of the intimidation routine included subtle references to her pregnancy. Beast would say things like, "It's too bad if stress leads to complications," or "I hope that baby can handle all the noise." Raptor and Blade, for their part, would slowly roam around the property, snapping photos with their phones or scribbling notes about irrigation lines. From her father's hidden notes, Rachel had already seen the red flags connecting suspicious property transfers and water management anomalies to the iron vultures. Matthias had documented everything meticulously: scans of public land records with glaring inconsistencies, receipts of under-the-table payments, and abrupt changes in local water quotas. He had even traced a series of payments from shell corporations to local officials, which coincided with permits being approved or blocked. All that data now sat encrypted on a secure server that Rachel oversaw from her unassuming greenhouse. After one particularly brazen daytime visit, Rachel retreated into the greenhouse's storage area. Under the guise of examining seed trays, she slid back a fake shelf, revealing a narrow corridor that led below ground level. This was the nerve center she had spent months constructing. Computers hummed in the low-lit space. Streams of real-time video from miniature cameras hidden around the property playing on multiple screens. Infrared sensors tracked exactly where each biker stood, how they moved, and whether they carried concealed weapons. Audio waveforms pulsed on one monitor, capturing every sneering remark Raptor muttered. Awaiting her was David Grant, a retired agricultural crimes investigator who had once worked closely with Matthias Delgado. David had since become a family friend and an indispensable resource for Rachel's covert operation. He turned in his chair, eyes reflecting concern. They're more systematic than just a random gang. I recognize some of the tactics from my old cases. They have training protocols, military or paramilitary maybe. Their positioning is no coincidence. Rachel sighed. Exactly what I was afraid of. How many farms have they seized? I've counted at least 6 across Carver County and 3 in the neighboring region. Confirmed. And we know each one had a direct link to key aquifer points or historically rumored mineral deposits. David brought up a map on the screen, showing a cluster of farmland that formed a suspicious ring around a known water system. From the pattern, it's as though they're specifically securing geological choke points. They want complete control over wherever this aquifer might be tapped. And if your father was right about certain minerals being present. Carla entered, still carrying her phone from an outside call. There's more bad news. Another farm a few miles east was vandalized last night. No sign of official involvement, but the owners found a threatening note pinned to their barn door, the Iron Vultures patch scribbled on it. She laid the phone down, letting Rachel and David see the pictures the neighbors had sent. Equipment ruined, water lines slashed. The owners are older folks. They're terrified. That's just it, Rachel said, anger flaring in her voice. These thugs rely on fear. They thrive on taking advantage of folks who can't fight back or who believe the local authorities won't protect them. And in many cases, law enforcement actually looks the other way. She shot a meaningful glance at David. She knew he had his own suspicions of compromised deputies and even some higher-level officers in the county. With the next stage of their plan nearing, Rachel tightened her resolve. Every sensor, camera, and piece of farm infrastructure doubled as part of a clandestine surveillance network. She was steadily building a case so solid that, once unleashed, it would be nearly impossible to dismiss. But the Iron Vultures were getting bolder, and Rachel sensed that soon enough the conflict would escalate. Beast's brazen approach became impossible to ignore one afternoon when a new group of bikers rode onto the property unannounced. They emerged from a cloud of dust kicked up along the unpaved road, a row of glinting chrome motorcycles, each bearing the Iron Vulture's emblem, a skeletal vulture with outstretched wings. Rachel emerged from the barn, stepping outside into the scorching sun. Carla, standing behind her, swallowed nervously. The lead biker, a lanky figure with a battered vest proclaiming the name Stryker, called out, "Heard you've been ignoring Beast's offers. That's not good for business, Delgado." He flicked the end of a cigarette into the dirt. "He's a busy man. You don't want to waste his time." Rachel forced a mask of uncertainty. "I've told Beast I'd think about it. The farm's in a delicate situation right now. We can't just sell or accept demands without looking at the finances." She tried to sound unsure, as if cornered. He spit into the dust. "You know what's delicate, Delgado? A baby on the way. And from what I hear, you've had some mechanical issues with your irrigation system. We can help fix that for a price. Our price. Rachel's heart pounded, but she gestured at the fields. Look around, we're not exactly drowning in profits here. Then maybe you need a partner with deeper pockets, Stryker said, feigning sympathy. Fine. Come on, we're not monsters. We just want to keep you safe. Keep your land safe too. Behind Rachel, Carla gripped a spade as if it were a baseball bat. David Grant, though unseen, was watching from a vantage point near the chicken coop, recording every word. Meanwhile, hidden microphones among the greenhouse planters transmitted crystal-clear audio to the subterranean command hub. The bikers were oblivious that their entire conversation was being saved in a format that could be replayed in court, frame by incriminating frame. After tossing a few more veiled threats, Stryker and the others roared off, leaving behind plumes of dust in a quiet farm workforce that pretended to be rattled. As soon as they were out of earshot, Rachel exhaled, stepping back into the barn's shadow. They're accelerating. The pressure's building. I suspect they have a timeline. Carla wiped sweat from her forehead. They keep hinting at external investors. That's what I overheard from one of them talking about, as if Beast is just a middleman. Rachel nodded. My father's documents suggested these gangs are just chess pieces in a bigger game. There's something about Carver County's aquifer. Something so valuable, it's worth orchestrating a large-scale operation to get rid of any private ownership that stands in their way. She recalled one particular page in Matthias's old notebook, which described anomalies in the water's chemical composition and singled out peculiar trace minerals that rarely appear in farmland. Matthias had jotted down side notes about corporate research labs being interested in unusual geological phenomena. The Iron Vulture's meddling in that case wasn't random or purely criminal. It was part of a well-financed initiative to gain exclusive rights over the region. Staring out at the rows of vegetables and fruit trees, Rachel felt a sobering sense of duty. Her father had dedicated his life to maintaining not just a farm, but a legacy of collaboration, community, and honest stewardship. If these criminals thought they could waltz in and exploit it, they had another thing coming. She steeled herself. Soon the Iron Vultures would discover that underestimating a pregnant farmer was the biggest mistake they could ever make. Tucked away in the greenhouse's hidden chamber later that evening, Rachel and David convened a video call with an old friend of Matthias Delgado, Dr. Sofia Iglesias, an environmental scientist based out of a major university's research lab. Rachel's father had once collaborated with Dr. Iglesias on sustainable crop projects and water preservation methods. So if anyone could shed light on the aquifer's secrets, it might be her. The laptop screen illuminated Rachel's face. Dr. Iglesias appeared, eyebrows arched with concern. Rachel, dear, how are you holding up? You look exhausted. Rachel managed a faint smile. Juggling farmland, a covert investigation, and impending motherhood will do that. I wanted to show you something. She uploaded a series of soil and water tests collected over the past few months. Every test indicated not just the usual nutrients, but also foreign chemical signatures that had no business showing up in farmland water. Dr. Iglesias' eyes narrowed as she studied the data. These readings are unusual. Certain heavy metals, rare minerals. Let me cross-check these with known geological pockets around Carver County. There was a pause as she typed away. These particular metals have been linked to advanced battery manufacturing, electronics, even specialized aerospace alloys. You're suggesting these traces exist naturally in your aquifer? That's extremely rare, Rachel. The conversation confirmed Rachel's suspicion that a major reason for the Iron Vulture's presence was beyond standard farmland intimidation. They wanted these unique deposits, or at least to control the land above them. David chimed in, explaining the patterns of sabotage that local farms had experienced and how each property destroyed or bought out tended to occupy critical spots over that aquifer system. Dr. Iglesias listened with mounting alarm. So this gang might be systematically obtaining these sites to either profit from the mineral rights or sell them off to some hidden corporate backer. If these metals are as valuable as your tests suggest, we're talking about tens, if not hundreds, of millions of dollars. David nodded. Precisely. They stage it so it looks like random crimes, but in reality, they're cornering farmland that sits atop this anomaly. Rachel's father probably realized all of this, and that made him a target. A moment of silence followed as Rachel remembered her dad's last few weeks of life. He had become reclusive, poring over geological data and confiding only in a select few people, like Dr. Iglesias. Then came the sudden heart attack that seemed far too convenient. "I need your help to confirm my father's final findings," Rachel said, swallowing a lump in her throat. "I suspect these iron vultures are preparing to do something big, something that might poison entire swaths of farmland to accelerate forced sales. I'll run these numbers through more advanced tests in my lab," Dr. Iglesias promised, her voice resolute. "Stay vigilant, and remember your father was never one to back down from a fight if something threatened honest farmers." After the call ended, Rachel exchanged a glance with David. There was comfort in knowing that Dr. Iglesias and other trusted allies could validate the science behind what Matthias had discovered. But it also underscored how urgent the situation had become. If those metals were truly that valuable, the iron vultures would stop at nothing to seize control. And if official channels couldn't be trusted, if local deputies and county boards were on the take, Rachel would need to rely on her father's blueprint for exposing corruption. Dawn arrived bathed in gold and magenta. Carla and Rachel took a dawn walk along the perimeter of Sunfield Acres. They passed newly set up camera posts camouflaged as simple birdhouses, irrigation lines with embedded microphones, and tractor sheds equipped with motion-activated recorders. Thanks to Rachel's engineering expertise, none of these setups were obvious, and even a keen observer would be fooled into thinking the farm was business as usual. As they reached the main dirt road, the rumble of an approaching motorcycle echoed. The two women exchanged a knowing glance and stepped back. A single rider came into view, a younger man with a vest labeling him as Ethan Reyes, one of the Iron Vulture's more recent recruits. He didn't have the hardened swagger of Beast or the cunning aura of Raptor. Instead, Ethan looked hesitant, even nervous, as he slowed his bike. Carla whispered, "This is new. They rarely send a single rider this early." Rachel stepped forward as Ethan cut the engine, dust settling around him. "What brings you here?" she asked, her tone measured. He removed his helmet, revealing dark hair and uneasy eyes. I need to talk, just for a minute, in private, if possible." From her vantage point, Rachel could see that Ethan's hands shook slightly on the handlebars. The typical intimidation factor was absent. She motioned for Carla to remain close but not interrupt. "We're listening," Rachel said. Glancing at the camera-laden greenhouse, Ethan cleared his throat. "Hey, look, I know what the Iron Vultures have been doing around here, but I swear this is not why I joined them. I'm an environmental engineer by training. Thought I'd found a steady gig mapping groundwater for investors who said they wanted to finance sustainable projects. But soon after I signed on, I realized they were forcing farmers out, polluting water supplies to tank property values. This is bigger than just a local gang. Someone high up wants these mineral-rich lands, and they'll do whatever it takes." Rachel looked hard into his eyes, reading desperation that seemed genuine. She'd heard through scattered rumors that Ethan had a background in geology or environmental studies, which didn't quite fit the typical thug profile. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked softly. "Because I can't stomach it anymore," Ethan said, voice trembling with a mixture of fear and moral turmoil. "I got into environmental work to help sustain farmland and water resources, not destroy them. I had no clue what I was stepping into. Now I see the sabotage, the hush money, the threats." He paused. "They're about to escalate. They have a new set of compounds, highly toxic chemicals that can push out or ruin everyone's harvest in record time. They're planning to contaminate your irrigation system, making it look like an equipment failure." Carla, who had been listening silently, stiffened. "What you're describing is an environmental catastrophe in the making. These chemicals, they could kill entire ecosystems, not just crops." Ethan nodded solemnly. "I've tried to reason with them, but they see me as just the new guy. They're pushing forward. I don't want to be part of it anymore." He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. "This has files showing the operational details. Who's supplying the chemicals, the plan of attack, the times and locations, and it implicates bigger players above Beast and Raptor. Rachel and Carla exchanged quick, shocked looks. Rachel took the flash drive. All right, Ethan, if this is legitimate, it could be the key to stopping them. But you realize once they figure out you've turned, you'll be their prime target. He swallowed. I'm prepared. I just want to do what's right. Your father tried to warn everyone. Maybe this can finish what he started. Back in the hidden command center, Rachel, Carla, and David pored over the contents of Ethan's flash drive. The files were meticulously organized, with spreadsheets listing chemical shipments, coded references to Operation Flood, and a timeline that hinted at a mass contamination effort set to occur in a matter of days. As Carla clicked through the file tree, David's brow furrowed. These shipping manifests reference a lab outside the state, one associated with some defense contractor. Why the hell would a defense contractor be involved in farmland contamination? Carla highlighted a portion of text describing compound beta, a synthesized chemical capable of triggering soil breakdown at the microbial level. The notes indicated that repeated use over a short period would drastically degrade soil quality, effectively forcing property owners to abandon farmland. The same compound, ironically, could reveal pockets of certain valuable minerals when combined with underground water channels. Rachel's voice trembled. It's worse than we thought. They're not just scaring farmers into selling. They're systematically accelerating geological processes to expose these hidden minerals. The contamination is a side effect, but they don't care who or what it harms. She cross-referenced these revelations with her father's old files. My dad discovered anomalies in the aquifer's composition. If these compounds are introduced at scale, it could create a massive environmental disaster, while also opening up short-term extraction of these rare minerals. The perfect plan in a twisted sense, David muttered angrily. Scare or force out the small farms, buy them up under shell corporations for pennies, and then quietly harvest the newly exposed deposits. By the time anyone realizes the real damage, the iron vultures and their backers will have flipped the land or extracted the resources for profit. Carla rubbed her temples. We need to do more than just collect evidence now. We have to prevent the contamination. If these shipments are already en route, we can't rely on local authorities. Most of them could be complicit, or at least pressured by the money behind these deals. Rachel nodded, eyes steeled with determination. That's why we gather everything, blow the whistle to the right people, and cause enough of a stir that those higher up can't ignore it. Scientists like Dr. Iglesias can confirm the real danger. And any honest law enforcement officers or federal investigators might jump in once they see the magnitude of the corruption. She inserted the flash drive into a secure laptop isolated from the rest of their network. While she scrolled, the farm's camera feeds showed a hint of dawn. The next shift of workers would soon arrive, oblivious that in a short span of time, the entire region might be upended by corporate greed and criminal undertakings. Ethan Reyes had risked everything to hand them this trove of incriminating material. It showed bank accounts, transaction logs, and references to a far more powerful figure than Beast or Raptor, someone identified only as Colonel Peterson. That name stood out. Rachel recognized it from one of her father's notebooks, which listed suspicious ex-military contacts living in the area. Could this colonel be orchestrating it all from behind the scenes? They looked at each other, a collective resolve forming in their eyes. We move fast, Rachel said. We coordinate with the few trustworthy folks we know, like Dr. Iglesias, and go public before they can shut us down. But we also prepare the farm for self-defense, because once Beast and the others realize we have these files, they'll come at us with everything they've got. The next morning, a heavy tension settled over Sunfield Acres. Carla organized the farm workers into discrete teams, each assigned tasks that doubled as defensive preparations. A group worked on fixing irrigation lines, but in fact they were installing hidden tripwire alarms that would notify Rachel's command center of unauthorized tampering. Another team spent extra time checking the fences while subtly fortifying them to slow any potential forced entry. In the command bunker beneath the greenhouse, David Grant established a rotating watch schedule. He also placed calls to a handful of friends in federal agencies, men and women he had once trusted back when he led investigations into cross-state agricultural crimes. A few of them still held key positions and owed David more than a few favors. "All I ask is that if you come out here, come heavy and ready," he told one contact over a secure line. "Local law enforcement can't be relied on entirely." Meanwhile, Rachel initiated the process of sending Dr. Iglesias a large encrypted data packet of Ethan's revelations. The plan was simple. If the Iron Vultures and their alleged backers tried to pull any lethal stunts, Dr. Iglesias would have everything she needed to alert major environmental watchdogs and media outlets. Hiding the truth would become increasingly difficult once the story spread. Around midday, the tension broke when a convoy of motorcycles roared up the road. At least 10 of them, led by Beast himself, dust plumed behind them like an advancing sandstorm. Workers halted their tasks, stepping back into barns and sheds as the gang parked in a semicircle near the greenhouse. Beast dismounted, towering and broad-shouldered, exuding raw menace. Raptor and Blade flanked him, each with unreadable scowls. Rachel emerged from the farmhouse, her posture firm despite the adrenaline hammering in her veins. She'd purposely chosen to make her pregnancy more obvious today, sporting a snug work shirt that clearly revealed her swollen belly. If they thought that made her weak, that was their mistake. Beast wasted no time. "Rachel Delgado, we've been patient. Heard you might be taking your sweet time, deciding whether you need our protection." He looked around, his eyes narrowing. "Looks like you've been busy. I see new fences, new wiring." Raptor chimed in. "Rumor has it you've been talking to outsiders, some big-shot scientist. That's not very neighborly." Rachel offered a contrived shrug. "I'm just trying to keep Sunfield Acres running. The finances aren't great, and yes, I've been exploring loans or partnerships. Maybe the scientist is part of that. It doesn't concern you." Blade stepped forward with a sneer. "Everything concerns us. Word is you're stirring trouble. We strongly advise against that." His threat was palpable. Pretending to be cornered, Rachel let her voice falter slightly. I'll decide soon. Could you just give me a bit more time? I don't want trouble, but I also can't sign away the farm on a whim." Beast sniffed the air, evidently not entirely convinced. "You have one day. By this time tomorrow, you either accept our offer or face the consequences." He then raised a hand, and the other bikers revved their engines in a unison that echoed across the fields. "I'd hate to see that baby grow up without a home to inherit." Their departing roar left behind a tense, suffocating silence. Rachel inhaled, pressing one hand protectively against her abdomen. The countdown had begun. As night fell, a storm gathered in the distance, lightning illuminating the horizon in brilliant flashes. Rachel sat in the underground command center, eyes bleary from the hours of reading and cross-referencing files on Ethan's flash drive. Carla circulated cups of coffee to keep everyone alert, though Rachel only sipped herbal tea for the baby's sake. David hunched over a console, listening to intercepts from local law enforcement channels. "Deputy Hanson is on their payroll," he muttered, shaking his head in frustration. "Confirmed. He's coordinating with the Iron Vultures about police response times, basically ensuring no quick backup if something happens here." "Figures," Rachel murmured, rubbing her temples. "I caught a snippet from Colonel Peterson's communications. He's apparently an ex-military contractor with connections in advanced resource extraction. He might be funneling these chemicals to Beast's crew." She tapped her finger on a portion of the screen that displayed coded references. "Operation Flood is real, and it's set to launch across multiple farm sites tomorrow. They'll introduce the chemicals into the irrigation systems, pass it off as a tragic malfunction, and pick up the pieces afterward." Carla paused, arms folded. "Let's finalize our defenses, and we should think about who else can physically show up to help." Ethan mentioned some members of the Iron Vultures themselves are uneasy about these extreme measures. They might turn if things get really ugly. Rachel took a deep breath, scanning a blueprint of Sunfield Acres with layered notations about defense points, camera placements, and infiltration routes. She had also mapped the likely routes the bikers would take if they aimed to encircle the farm. "We'll stay out of sight. Let them think we're unprepared. Every second they're on our property is more evidence. Once we have them on record trying to deploy these chemicals, we'll blow it wide open, send real-time feeds to the authorities we trust. plus multiple media outlets. Night deepened. The storm crept closer, thunder rolling across the plains. In the flicker of the command center's screens, the tension felt almost palpable, as if the storm mirrored the confrontation looming. Rachel rested a hand on her belly again, caught in the swirl of hope and fear. Matthias Delgado had laid the groundwork for this infiltration, had meticulously documented corruption. Now, with Ethan's revelations, they were nearly ready to reveal the full extent of the Iron Vulture's crimes. David tapped a few keys, pulling up a new feed showing the Iron Vulture's main hideout, an abandoned warehouse near the county line. More bikes are showing up by the hour. They're gathering a small army. Indeed, the IR camera feed revealed gatherings of men checking weapons and packing gear into saddlebags. Carla cursed under her breath. They're coming for all of us, not just you. Rachel's expression hardened. They have no idea we've meticulously planned for this, or that we have federal contacts waiting to see proof. Let them come. My father always said, sometimes you have to let a storm hit so you can catch it on every radar imaginable. Tomorrow's the day. Morning arrived under a bruised sky, the storm clouds from the night before refusing to disperse. A stillness enveloped Sunfield Acres that felt almost eerie. Workers quietly took their positions, each pretending to go about daily routines like tending the livestock or irrigating the fields. But behind their calm facades, everyone was on high alert, eyes on the horizon for any sign of the Iron Vultures. Just after 8 o'clock, the far-off rumble of engines broke the silence. David signaled Rachel from the barn's doorway. They're here. Looks like the main crew plus some reinforcements. 15, maybe 20 bikes. Through the greenhouse's tinted glass, Rachel watched as the motorcycles fanned out in the yard, kicking up gravel. Beast was at the forefront, helmet off, his face set in an expression of grim purpose. Raptor and Blade flanked him, just like before, but this time they wore purposeful grins, as if confident that no one could oppose them. A few steps behind them, Colonel Peterson climbed out of an unmarked SUV. He was tall, with military bearing that matched the rumored background. A quick glance told Rachel this was a much more formidable figure than Beast. A hush settled over the entire farm. Rachel made sure her posture conveyed trepidation, stepping out cautiously to meet them. Carla stood behind her, brandishing the same spade she always carried, though she was anything but helpless. We didn't expect such a large group, Rachel began, feigning uncertainty. Beast's voice was low. Time's up, Delgado. Either you agree to sign over rights to the property, or we'll have to show you what happens when folks ignore our goodwill. Colonel Peterson interjected. Beast, remember our arrangement. Let's see if Ms. Delgado is willing to be more rational. You've had time to think, Ms. Delgado. Don't let misguided pride destroy what's left of your family's legacy. Rachel nearly spat at his condescension. My father taught me not to be bullied by self-important mercenaries. The colonel's eyes narrowed. Your father's no longer around, is he? The tension spiked. The hidden cameras captured every sneer, every threatening posture, every word. Off to the side, Carla discreetly signaled David, who activated the final layer of surveillance. Live transmission of the farm's perimeter cameras to multiple off-site servers. Beast glanced around, noticing an unusual lack of fear. You sure are brave for a pregnant woman about to lose everything. Where are your employees? Hiding? Rachel didn't flinch. They're just busy. Livestock doesn't tend itself. How do you propose we handle this arrangement? A smirk spread across Beast's face. We have a contract just waiting for your signature. You get a buyout, enough to move anywhere you want. In exchange, we own the farm. You can even keep working here if you like. Under new management, of course. Raptor unrolled a folder, revealing official-looking paperwork. Rachel recognized the name of a shell corporation that her father had flagged in his journals. So it was all a front. Colonel Peterson folded his arms. Sign it, or else we begin our demonstration. We have chemicals in the vans, enough to shut down your precious farmland for decades. You'll regret refusing. At that threat, Rachel let fear creep into her voice, though inside she burned with resolve. Chemicals? But why ruin farmland if you want to buy it? Colonel Peterson gave a cold chuckle. We only need certain aspects of the land, Ms. Delgado, not all of it. In that moment, the first crack of thunder roared in the distance. A swirl of wind whipped across the fields as if nature itself bristled at the audacity of their threats. Rachel knew they were seconds from crossing a line, one that would trigger the full deployment of her father's plan. Cold gusts of wind whipped across the yard as Rachel Delgado stood before Colonel Peterson and Beast, every nerve in her body alight. The tension in the air felt electric, echoing the oncoming thunder. Somewhere behind her, Carla clutched a spade, and several farmhands lingered just out of sight, unsure whether to retreat or stand their ground. The iron vultures had arrived in force, determined to seize Sunfield Acres, yet Rachel noticed subtle shifts in the bikers' demeanor. Not all of them looked eager to escalate things. In particular, Ethan Reyes, who stood off to one side, maintained a blank expression, but she could sense the turmoil behind his eyes. Beast's grip tightened on the contract folder in his hand, while Colonel Peterson's gaze flicked over to an unmarked van rolling in behind the motorcycles. From the van's open doors, Rachel spotted heavy-duty containers bearing hazard labels. She imagined the lethal chemicals inside, powerful enough to ruin acres of farmland within hours. "We won't leave here empty-handed," Peterson declared, voice laced with authority. "Whether you sign or not, we're introducing new elements into your irrigation system. This property will be ours, one way or another." Before Rachel could respond, there was a commotion behind the colonel. A handful of bikers debated in hushed but heated tones. Some of the iron vultures had grown uneasy at the threat of mass contamination. A tall figure named Dutch, who had once served with Beast in a faraway conflict, shook his head. "We never talked about poisoning the land," he muttered. "This is crossing a line." Another grizzled member spat on the ground in agreement. Rachel caught only fragments, but it sounded like they were having second thoughts about turning farmland into a chemical wasteland. Peterson frowned, evidently overhearing. "If any of you want out, now's the time. Once we move forward, there's no turning back." His voice held a calm, lethal edge. Perhaps it was a challenge as much as a warning. Ignoring the dissent in his own ranks, Beast turned to Rachel. "Last chance. Ink your name on this contract." He flipped the folder open and jabbed at a dotted line. "It's a simple deal. Hand over the deed, keep quiet, and maybe we'll spare the heart of your fields." Nausea churned in Rachel's stomach. She bit her lip, letting a tense silence stretch. Then, through the windows of the greenhouse, she saw David Grant's face appear in a reflection. He was signaling that every camera was recording, capturing this moment from multiple angles. So much evidence, she thought. If they played it right, the iron vultures would implicate not only themselves but also the colonel's shadowy backers in a massive environmental crime. Carla, sensing the moment, raised her voice. "Even if we sign, there's no guarantee you won't sabotage the soil. You've attacked other farms who gave in. Your promises don't mean a thing." Beast bristled, his expression shifting to outright anger. "Careful how you talk, lady." In that charged instant, thunder boomed overhead, rattling the windows. The natural fury of the storm seemed to mirror the confrontation about to explode. Rachel took one last gulp of air, ready for the next move. A sudden crackle came from Colonel Peterson's shoulder radio. He stepped away from the group for a moment, pressing a hand to his earpiece. Rachel couldn't hear everything, but she caught enough of the words. Clear the perimeter. Deploy the compounds. No turning back. Her pulse spiked. The colonel was about to give the order that could devastate the farm's water table and render the soil nearly unusable. She felt a protective fury rise within her. Every sensor and camera meticulously installed across Sunfield Acres had been collecting data for months. Rachel's father, Matthias, had taught her never to wait until all was lost to fight back. It was time to deploy their own plan, the one she, Carla, and David had coordinated with the help of Dr. Sofia Iglesias and a handful of trustworthy federal contacts. Rachel's gaze flickered to Ethan Reyes. He stepped forward as if to intervene, but Colonel Peterson cut him off with a sharp glare. "Stay in line, Reyes," Peterson snapped. "I won't warn you twice." Ethan froze, caught between wanting to blow the operation wide open and risking exposure. He'd already handed Rachel the flash drive with incriminating evidence, but the colonel's readiness for violence made him reluctant to take any overt action. Rachel subtly nodded at him, acknowledging the risk he'd taken and signaling that it was almost time to blow their cover. "Everyone out here now," Peterson barked at the rest of the bikers. We have a job to do. The men began to spread out, some heading toward the irrigation line, others rolling the chemical barrels down ramps from the van. Beast and Raptor placed small devices near water inlets, meant to pump the toxins directly into the irrigation system. All right, Rachel said loudly, hoping her voice carried enough conviction. If you're going to do this, at least let me get my workers clear of the fields. We don't need casualties if you're bent on ruining my land. She sounded resigned, but it was all part of the ploy. Peterson shrugged, glancing sideways at Beast. Fine, move them off, but they'll witness what happens to property owners who think they can defy us. Carla took off across the fields, gathering the others. Unbeknownst to Peterson or Beast, she was ushering them not just to safety, but to vantage points that would record and live stream the entire sabotage process. Meanwhile, David, concealed inside the barn, typed a rapid series of commands, activating an emergency broadcast to a small network of environmental groups and a handful of national reporters he'd secretly looped in. Lightning spidered across the sky, and the wind kicked up dust around the bikers. Raptor wrestled with the barrel's pump, cursing at the stiff mechanism. Two other men steadied the container as a thick greenish liquid sloshed inside. The moment they attached the device to the irrigation line, sensors across the farm lit up. In the greenhouse basement, invisible to the Colonel and Beast, monitors tracked chemical composition changes and water flow rates in real time. The system was set to automatically feed that data to multiple external servers. As the catastrophic plan unfolded, a wave of evidence was simultaneously flooding into the email inboxes of investigative journalists, environmental regulators, and anyone else David had flagged. Rachel held her breath, observing how methodically the Iron Vultures advanced. They had done this before, no question. The consistency of their routine, the distribution of tasks, and the impersonal efficiency they brought to farmland destruction all pointed to extensive planning. A few of them wrestled with the irrigation valves, ensuring the contaminated water would disperse quickly once the compound was released. But something else was happening on the margins. Several bikers who had been loyal to Beast now hesitated. Dutch and another member, Smokey, exchanged worried looks each time a drum of chemicals was rolled into place. A subtle schism rippled through the gang, with those who were ex-military or had families of their own shifting uncomfortably. They seemed to realize that if they drenched the land in these toxic compounds, the devastation would be massive and impossible to conceal. Colonel Peterson, however, hadn't missed the unrest in the ranks. Fixing them with a stern glare, he barked, "Anyone who can't handle the job is free to leave, but don't expect to be welcome back, ever." His voice carried the flat finality of someone who had lived through wartime commands. Some of the bikers dropped their gazes. Even if they disliked the plan, fear of Peterson and the unknown investors behind him kept them in line. Meanwhile, Rachel saw Ethan Reyes start inching closer to the nearest infiltration point, as though he wanted to sabotage the sabotage. His eyes flicked to her for just an instant, and she offered the barest nod. They were running out of time. If the compound reached the water supply in full force, the consequences would be dire, not only for Sunfield Acres, but for the entire region. Thunder boomed again, closer this time, followed by a slash of lightning that illuminated the farmland in brilliant white. The horizon darkened as if the storm itself condemned the foul act taking place. Rachel placed her hand gently over her pregnant belly, her resolve firm. She couldn't let them poison this land. It was bigger than just her farm or her baby. It was about protecting a community her father had cherished and a resource essential to countless families. Suddenly, the ground shook slightly, a minor tremor. The bikers glanced around in confusion. Carla and David had coordinated a secondary measure. The greenhouse's advanced hydrology system injected a protective, neutralizing agent at certain junctions. The slight rumble was the old pipes shuddering under the abrupt shift in pressure. If timed perfectly, the chemical sabotage would be at least partially neutralized. David's voice crackled in Rachel's earpiece. Phase 1 activation successful. They won't notice it immediately, but we're buying ourselves a bit of time. We need to confirm the final link. Rachel gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. Their father's research hadn't been limited to discovering how to farm more efficiently. He'd also experimented with ways to halt or reverse chemical damage in soils, Lessons gleaned from early attempts to ward off pest infestations. By connecting that system to the main lines, they had a shot at undermining the Iron Vulture's sabotage. Suddenly, the still air erupted into chaos. From the barn's side door, David Grant stepped out with a digital camera in full view, its record light blinking. He advanced boldly toward the colonel, capturing every angle of the bikers and their loaded chemical drums. "This entire operation is on tape," he shouted over the howling wind. "We've documented your threats, the sabotage, everything, and we're streaming it live." Beast's eyes flared in fury. "What are you doing, old man? You trying to get killed?" He stormed forward, but David stood his ground, keeping the camera pointed. Colonel Peterson, on the other hand, radiated a deadly calm. "Turn that camera off," he ordered. "You have no idea what forces you are up against. We can make you disappear." David's hand didn't waver. "If something happens to any of us, the evidence is already out there. A dozen different media outlets have it, not to mention environmental watchdogs. You can't silence everyone." Rachel seized the moment. Stepping in front of Peterson, she said loudly, "You can't intimidate us into handing over our land. And even if you succeed in contaminating the fields, you'll have a swarm of federal agents here by nightfall. You've lost, Colonel." The colonel's composure cracked just a fraction. He turned to Beast. "Break the lines," he said curtly. "Release as much of the compound as possible. Let the farmland drown in toxins. We'll salvage what we need later." At that directive, half the bikers sprang into action, twisting valves and uncapping nozzles. A thick, noxious fluid began trickling into the farm's irrigation channels. Ethan Reyes looked stricken, evidently torn between obeying orders and intervening. Dutch and Smokey stood there, grim-faced, uncertain whether to carry on or walk away. Carla hurried over to Rachel, whispering, "The neutralizing agent is flowing, but it might not be enough if they dump all that toxic stuff at once. We have to do something more direct." Rachel nodded, her mind racing. She had a fallback plan, shutting down the entire irrigation grid from a master control panel in the underground chamber. But to access it, she'd have to get inside the greenhouse. Right now, the colonel's men milled between her and the entrance. "Keep stalling them," Rachel murmured, then broke into a sprint toward the greenhouse. Raptor lunged to block her path, but Carla let out a fierce cry and brandished her spade, forcing him to sidestep. The sudden scuffle created just enough distraction for Rachel to dart around, narrowly avoiding the front of a loaded motorcycle. She tore through the greenhouse doors, heart pounding, each footstep echoing on the tiled floor. The green glow of LED grow lights illuminated rows of tomatoes and peppers, but beneath them, hidden panels housed the advanced control systems. She pressed her palm against an innocuous display labeled temperature control, prompting it to slide back and reveal a keypad. Inputting her father's emergency override code, she gained access to a new console. Outside, more thunder boomed. Rachel could hear yelling and cursing, the Iron Vultures unsure whether to flee or continue as federal exposure loomed. She typed commands into the console, eyes flicking over pressure gauges, chemical sensors, and water flow readings. The lines were spiking, too much contamination, too fast. Even her father's neutralizing formula might be overwhelmed. "Come on," she whispered, toggling the override switches. "Shut it down." A final keystroke triggered the irrigation system's master kill switch. Automated valves clamped shut with a deep mechanical thud. The sound reverberated through the pipes like a heartbeat stopping. Outside the greenhouse, the Iron Vultures realized too late that the water was no longer flowing. The trickle of greenish toxin diminished to a mere drip, leaving chemical residue in the channels, but not enough to fully saturate the fields. Beast kicked the nearest valve in anger, while Colonel Peterson glared at the greenhouse with murderous intensity. "We're not done," Peterson hissed. "If the standard route is shut off, we can forcibly breach the system. We still have pressurized pumps and reserve compounds in the van." He motioned for Raptor, Blade, and several others to retrieve specialized equipment from a second vehicle. Ethan Reyes hovered near the group, swallowing hard. He caught sight of Carla helping an older farmhand up off the ground where he had stumbled during the commotion. The farmhand looked terrified but determined, as though, even in the face of lethal chemicals, he refused to abandon the land he had spent decades nurturing. Something broke inside Ethan at that sight. He stepped forward, adrenaline firing through his veins. No, we're not going to do this. His voice echoed louder than he expected, drawing everyone's attention. Colonel Peterson turned slowly, eyes burning. Care to repeat that, Reyes? I said no, Ethan replied, voice trembling, but resolute. We're not unleashing more toxins. This is insane. You promised me we were here to investigate sustainable development, not commit environmental terrorism. Beast's hand hovered near the pistol at his belt. Careful, kid. You know the colonel doesn't tolerate insubordination. You want out? You better walk away right now. But Ethan didn't budge. I'm not walking away. This place deserves to be protected. You people are crossing every moral line I've ever known. If you release those compounds, you'll kill the soil for generations. Dutch and Smokey exchanged glances, then joined Ethan in stepping away from the main group. Several other bikers seemed ready to do the same, their expressions shifting from uncertainty to a grim resolve. The colonel's lethal gaze flicked from face to face, measuring how quickly the entire operation was crumbling. From her vantage point near a water channel, Rachel saw that the iron vultures were fracturing. Half of them remained loyal to Peterson and Beast. The other half stood uncertainly with Ethan, not quite sure if they dared to defy men who had once held absolute power in their world. Time felt suspended as the storm overhead crescendoed. Sheets of rain began to pour, soaking everything in moments. Visibility dwindled, but from behind the curtain of rain, Rachel made out the silhouettes of men either gripping chemical barrels or standing in mutinous defiance. She prayed that David and Carla would find a way to keep the compound from being manually deployed while she made the final push for help. Back in the greenhouse control room, Rachel typed a fresh set of commands. They triggered not only the final fail-safes her father had built, but also a direct signal to a remote server. The evidence, videos, chemical analyses, bank statements from Ethan's flash drive, would now go live to everyone on David's distribution list. By the time the colonel could say retreat, there would be no turning back. An unmarked patrol car screeched to a halt at the farm's entrance, blue lights flashing in the gloom. Rachel's heart initially surged with hope, but David's grim expression told her something different. This was likely Deputy Hansen, the compromised officer who had been feeding information to the iron vultures. Indeed, the door opened to reveal Hansen's short, stocky frame. He angled himself carefully, scanning the yard filled with bikers, chemical barrels, and frantic farm workers. From his vantage point, Colonel Peterson's lips curled in a half-smile. Perhaps he believed law enforcement had finally arrived to shield him from accountability. "Deputy," he called, stepping forward with the confidence of a man expecting cooperation. "We've got a situation here." Hansen walked closer, one hand resting on the butt of his service weapon. He spotted Carla and David, recognized them from prior warnings about troublemakers. But the scope of the scene seemed to rattle him. Toxic barrels, shattered irrigation lines, and a posse of very angry bikers partially turned against each other. "Nobody do anything stupid," Hansen announced, voice trying for official bravado, but shaking slightly. "Just calm down. Let me see what's going on." Rachel emerged from the greenhouse, water streaming off her hat. "They attempted to contaminate our farm," she said directly, pointing to the barrels, "and the entire incident is being broadcast to outside authorities." Beast snarled, "That's a lie. They're trespassing on our business. This farmland is in the process of being sold. Look at the contract." He waved the partially signed documents, though Rachel had never actually put her signature on them. Colonel Peterson approached Hansen and lowered his voice. "We can handle this. There's no need to involve outside agencies. Just keep the farmers quiet for a few more hours." Deputy Hansen hesitated, glancing at the chaos. He saw Peterson's stern expression and the ragtag group of bikers behind him, half of whom seemed uneasy. He also saw camera lenses glinting through the rain. Slowly he realized it wouldn't be simple to hush this up. A single misstep could brand him as a criminal co-conspirator. "Colonel, this is bigger than I expected," Hansen stammered. "You said we'd just be keeping some troublemakers off your private property. But I'm seeing hazardous materials, men with guns. I don't know if I can cover this." An eerie quiet settled as Colonel Peterson's nostrils flared. The facade of polite persuasion vanished. "Then you'd better rethink your loyalties, Deputy," he hissed. We have your bank statements, your promises. Are you going to back out now that things are a little complicated? Lightning flashed overhead and Hansen paled, sweat mixing with rain on his forehead. He kept his hand on his holster but did not draw. "Listen, Colonel," he murmured. "Nobody said anything about mass poisoning. That's out of my league." Rachel watched the exchange, lips parted in tense anticipation. If Hansen was cracking, then Colonel Peterson's operation was standing on even shakier ground. She scanned the yard for any sign that real backup, like federal agents or supportive local police, might be near. They had triggered the broadcast. Someone had to be on the way. David sidled up to Rachel, speaking under his breath. "Hang in there. We've done all we can. Let's hope Dr. Iglesias and the others come through." A sharp whistle cut through the steady downpour. Everyone turned to see Dutch, who had taken a stand with Ethan Reyes. Several other iron vultures flanked them. Despite the rain, their postures were resolute. Dutch pointed a gloved finger at Colonel Peterson. "We signed up for some intimidation, sure, but not this. You're talking about wrecking entire ecosystems, poisoning families' water supplies. That's not why we got into this life." Peterson scowled. "You can't claim innocence now, Dutch. Your hands are already dirty from the other farms. Or have you forgotten the ranch you threatened last month?" Dutch shook his head, rain dripping from his hair. "I thought we were pressuring them for a buyout, not trashing everything they owned. We never used chemicals, never saw anything this extreme. If we'd known, we'd have left sooner." A low murmur went through the bikers. Even Smokey stepped forward, nodding in agreement. "This is too far, Colonel. We're not murdering farmland." Beast observed the fracturing group, a sneer twisting his lips. "Traitors," he hissed. But the colonel seemed less interested in name-calling, more concerned that his carefully orchestrated plan was unraveling. "Fools," Peterson spat. "If you're out, but don't expect to ride away unscathed." Two of his loyal henchmen moved closer, hands drifting toward concealed firearms. Rachel's heart hammered. A firefight now would put innocent farm workers in danger. She glanced toward Carla, who was beckoning the remaining workers to find cover behind the barn. Meanwhile, Deputy Hansen stood frozen, torn between intervening as law enforcement or fleeing to avoid incrimination. Suddenly, a new roar of engines broke through the scene. This time, they weren't motorcycles. Several SUVs splashed down the muddy road, headlights piercing the gloom. The vehicles bore no obvious markings, but the uniformed men jumping out quickly flashed badges that identified them as part of a federal task force. Word must have reached them in time. David's face lit with relief. "Thank God," he muttered. "They're from the Environmental Crimes Division, or maybe a joint federal team. This could be our saving grace." One agent, wearing a rain-soaked windbreaker with tiny white letters reading "Ipe Fed," shouted through a loudspeaker, "Drop all weapons and step away from the chemical containers." A second set of agents fanned out, capturing the scene on their own cameras. Colonel Peterson's scowl deepened, and he tugged at the collar of his jacket, as though considering a last-ditch move. But the presence of multiple armed federal agents made even him hesitate. Beast seethed, casting glances in every direction. The fierce glint in his eyes suggested that if things went awry, he'd try to shoot his way out. Raptor and Blade backed up, tension rippling through their every movement. With the arrival of federal forces, the turning point was clear. Either Peterson's crew would surrender, or an all-out clash would erupt in the muddy field of Sunfield Acres. Lightning speared the sky again, followed by a deafening crack of thunder. The federal agents, ignoring the pounding rain, advanced cautiously. Their leader, a tall, no-nonsense woman with the nameplate Agent Karimi, stopped within earshot of Colonel Peterson. "We have credible evidence linking you to attempted environmental sabotage, extortion, and conspiracy. I'm instructing you and your associates to stand down immediately." Peterson's jaw clenched. "You have no jurisdiction here. This is private property, and we have a legal business arrangement with the owner." He pointed to Rachel. "Ask Ms. Delgado yourself. She was about to sign over the land." Agent Karimi didn't flinch. "We have recorded footage of your men tampering with irrigation lines and introducing hazardous substances, not to mention threatening violence. That's enough for probable cause, and more." A tense standoff lingered. Mud sloshed underfoot as the bikers exchanged wary glances. Even Beast, who'd always been the biggest enforcer, appeared at a loss. He stared at Colonel Peterson, waiting for a cue. If Peterson signaled, they might fire, though the federal agents clearly outnumbered them now. Meanwhile, the group with Ethan, Dutch, and Smokey visibly relaxed at the agent's presence. Smokey said under his breath, "Maybe we can cut a deal if we cooperate." He looked at Ethan, who nodded, having already assisted Rachel's investigation. "I strongly suggest you all put your weapons on the ground," Agent Karimi said, stepping forward once more. Her colleagues spread out, forming a loose semicircle around the bikers and the chemical barrels. "Whoever cooperates will be given a chance to explain their role in this operation." Peterson let out a mirthless laugh. "You think I'm afraid of some bureaucratic suits? My contacts go higher than you can imagine. This is bigger than a farmland dispute." Rachel, wiping water from her eyes, finally spoke up. "You won't be able to hide what you've done, Colonel. We've sent every shred of data to multiple agencies, including the press. If you think someone can bail you out, you're wrong. The entire network of corruption is exposed." An uneasy hush followed, broken by the patter of rain. Then, with a resigned growl, Beast threw his gun to the ground. Raptor and Blade, after exchanging dark looks, did the same. One by one, several bikers disarmed, stepping back with hands raised. The dissenting group that stood by Ethan needed no urging. They too laid down any weapons they carried. Colonel Peterson stood alone in the center, a furious storm in his eyes. He seemed ready to do something reckless. But even he could tell that resisting at this point was suicide. "This isn't over," he muttered, glaring at Rachel as if memorizing every line of her face. Slowly, he lifted his hands away from his jacket. A second later, a quiet clang sounded as a small pistol hit the mud. Agents surged in, cuffing the colonel and each armed biker before they could change their minds. Beast spat curses, Raptor glowered at the ground, and Blade shook his head as if stunned it had come to this. Dutch and Smokey willingly surrendered, stepping forward to give statements. Ethan moved up to Rachel, relief etched across his features. The storm raged, but within that chaos, a sense of profound calm settled over Rachel. They had done it, protected Sunfield acres from destruction, and revealed a hidden network of greed and sabotage. Now came the next battle, ensuring these criminals faced the consequences and that the farmland could recover. Hours later, as the storm clouds thinned and dawn's first light shimmered on the soaked fields, the aftermath of the showdown became clear. Federal agents combed through the property, photographing chemical barrels, collecting water samples, and interviewing those who had witnessed the sabotage attempt. A triage station was set up in the barn for any injuries. Rachel, Carla, and David huddled near the greenhouse with Agent Karimi, going through formal statements. Exhaustion weighed heavily on them, but they pressed on, wanting every detail recorded accurately. Ethan sat on a nearby crate, waiting his turn to testify. He'd already handed over the original flash drive, and the look on his face spoke of a tangled relief, freedom from the criminal ring that had ensnared him. The farmland itself bore signs of the iron vulture's assault. Some irrigation lines lay cracked. Certain soils were tinted by partial chemical residue. And overhead, the once thriving orchard leaves seemed droopy, as if traumatized by the sudden upheaval. But the bulk of the toxins had been halted before causing irreversible damage, thanks to Rachel's father's neutralizing agent and the timely shutdown of the water system. "How extensive is the contamination?" Rachel asked Agent Karimi, glancing at the puddles where the greenish fluid had pooled. Karimi frowned at the test results that one of her colleagues handed her. "We've got elevated levels of hazardous compounds in certain sections, but it's nowhere near as bad as it could have been. The neutralizing formula you introduced saved this place from total devastation. We'll need specialized cleanup crews, but your farmland should recover, Ms. Delgado." Relief washed over Rachel. Despite the exhaustion, she managed a tired smile. "My father would be grateful that his work protected this community. These fields have fed so many families. I'd hate to see them poisoned for the sake of someone's profit." Carla nodded, stepping forward. "We'll rally the neighbors too. There's no shortage of farm folk ready to help reseed or replant if necessary, as soon as we're sure the soil is safe." David handed over a detailed log to Karimi. "This covers all the evidence we gathered. The recordings, the chemical analysis, plus every link to Colonel Peterson's backers. It's cross-referenced with land records, showing how properties were systematically targeted. Karimi's eyes lit with professional appreciation. You've done our job for us. This is enough to unravel not just the iron vultures here in Carver County, but also their financial partners. We've already identified shell companies tied to a contractor that, in turn, connects to high-level officials. There could be a massive takedown once this hits the court system. Rachel sighed in relief. That's all we wanted, justice and a chance to save this farmland from their clutches. She glanced over at Ethan, who was being interviewed by two younger agents. He was telling them everything about how he'd been recruited under false pretenses. The farm staff stood in small clusters around the yard, sharing stories of the night's events. Some joked that the storm had acted as cosmic justice, punishing the iron vultures for trying to play with nature's balance. Others just looked weary, ready for a hot meal and a dreamless sleep. But overall, there was a collective sense of triumph and unity. Sunfield Acres had survived. 2 weeks later, Carver County felt like a different place. Although the fields still bore patches of damaged soil, the cleansing rains and a careful application of Rachel's father's neutralizing formula had begun the land's slow healing process. The iron vulture's defeat also signaled to other would-be criminals that the farms here weren't so easily victimized. Word spread quickly that a pregnant farmer had dared to stand up to corporate-backed thugs, and won. Many of the bikers who had broken from the gang's leadership ended up cooperating with federal investigators, offering testimony that helped unravel the entire conspiracy. Colonel Peterson faced charges ranging from environmental terrorism to racketeering, and the web of corrupt county officials he'd counted on found themselves under investigation, with arrests following in the subsequent days. Deputy Hanson cut a plea deal, admitting his part in tipping off the bikers in exchange for leniency. Rachel, now entering her 8th month of pregnancy, made slow rounds each morning to assess the fields. Carla walked beside her, pointing out where new seeds could be planted and how the orchard might rebound. They both felt Matthias Delgado's presence in every turn of the soil, each cautious step forward in the farm's recovery. Dr. Sofia Iglesias paid a visit, drawn by the chance to see Rachel's father's defensive innovations firsthand. She brought a team of graduate students who collected soil and water samples, marveling at how the neutralizing formula had counteracted such potent toxins. Your father was a genius, Rachel, Dr. Iglesias said, carefully storing test tubes in a cooler. With more research, we might apply his methods to other contaminated sites across the country. It's rare to find an environmentally friendly formula that can break down those kinds of industrial compounds. Later that afternoon, Ethan Reyes stopped by with a small truckload of supplies: organic fertilizer, clean topsoil, and specialized seeds. I owed you, he explained a bit sheepishly. I know I can't undo everything that happened, but I want to help fix it. Rachel smiled, genuine warmth in her eyes. You risked your life to expose them. That's more than I could ever repay. If you hadn't come forward, this entire farm would be a toxic dump. He paused, gazing out at the acres of land under the sun's gentle glow. I'm just grateful for a second chance. The feds say if I continue cooperating and testifying, I might avoid prison. He let out a breath. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd get mixed up in hurting farmland. I wanted to preserve water resources. Then came the money and the lies. I'm sorry. Carla, who had joined them, placed a supportive hand on Ethan's shoulder. You've already made it right by helping us in farm. That's enough for me. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves. In the distance, workers mended fences, hammered planks, and tested water lines. Though the scars of sabotage remained, the pulse of life at Sunfield Acres felt stronger than ever. The entire community, neighbors, environmental groups, even the reformed bikers, had come together to restore what greed nearly destroyed. Rachel drew a calming breath. We'll heal this land just as my father would have wanted, and we'll keep fighting anyone who threatens it. She gently pressed her hand against her belly, feeling the faint kicks of a new generation that would, she hoped, inherit not a battleground, but a thriving, protected homeland. Looking back on this entire journey, it's amazing how a single farm, led by one courageous pregnant woman, could stand against an entire criminal network and potential corporate corruption. Rachel Delgado's steadfast belief in protecting her father's dream and the unity of her community proved stronger than any intimidation or toxic threat. Through solidarity, resourcefulness, and genuine concern for each other, they transformed Carver County into an example of resistance and renewal. From my own perspective, the most powerful message here is that true strength doesn't require you to be the loudest or the most intimidating. Rather, it's rooted in determination, unity, and faith in what's right. What stood out to you? Comment below with your thoughts, questions, or any angles you found especially intriguing. Let's keep the conversation going. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel to stay tuned for more stories that celebrate courage, community, and the triumph of hope over fear. We'd love to hear your perspective and keep sharing more tales that inspire us all.